Fort Gibson holds a unique place in Cherokee history. In this Cherokee Almanac, we find out how this historic settlement impacted the Cherokee Nation throughout the 19th century. In the 1820s, the federal government began forcibly removing some 60,000 indigenous peoples from their homelands in the southeastern United States, relocating them to lands west of the Mississippi River. For many Creek, Seminole, and Cherokee people, their forced removal to Indian Territory in what is now the state of Oklahoma ended up at Fort Gibson.
Fort Gibson is established in April of 1824 because of United States Indian policy. The soldiers have to establish a peace on a frontier in order to be able to further American Indian removal policy.
Located further west than any other existing U.S. post at the time, Fort Gibson was truly considered the American frontier. Its position at the convergence of the Arkansas, Verdigris, and Grand Rivers made it key to water navigation and protecting the new western border of the United States.
Soldiers from the 7th Infantry came here from Fort Smith, Arkansas, because of the difficulties of the immigrating Indians from the east.
In the early years of the fort's existence, much of the garrison's time was occupied monitoring tensions between the Osage and the Cherokee.
So in order to get other tribes that are back east to move west, the government has to stop this war that is going on between Cherokees who are moving into the area and Osages who are already living there.
In 1832, Fort Gibson became a disbandment depot for displaced peoples of the relocated tribes after the Trail of Tears. At these locations, tribal citizens received rations and supplies to start new lives in Indian Territory.
The garrison now becomes a check-in point. They help the depots in order to be able to resupply people and give them the basics of what they need once they arrive in Indian Territory. They're also heavily involved in doing this with Creeks and Seminoles as well.
Over time, the need for a military presence declined, and by the 1850s, Cherokees urged Congress to remove the stockade.
Once John Ross arrives in Indian Territory, he set about removing any federal garrison.
The military post is closed because there was not much need, and the Cherokee wanted their best boat landing in the territory for their own.
In 1857, the U.S. government deeded the property to the Cherokee Nation, who renamed it the town of Katua.
The government turns the buildings over to the Cherokee Nation. There are several, mercantile stores in the area, and there's a boat landing. The location of it is very attractive.
The military buildings that were here were rented out by the nation and occupied most of the time by people of the Cherokee Nation.
Although Confederate troops took possession of the fort briefly at the beginning of the U.S. Civil War, the Union Army occupied Fort Gibson in 1863 and held it until the end of the war 2 years later. The camp town rebounded, housing many pro-Union Cherokee and formerly enslaved people seeking protection.
The Federals moved in and refortified the old fort that was left by the Confederate Army.
The town of Katua was something that they could be proud of. They had substantial buildings here. They had some substantial people.
U.S. troops continued to occupy and improve the fort after the Civil War. New buildings were constructed and the military presence remained. In 1866, the Cherokee Nation reinstated the settlement's original name, Fort Gibson.
After the war is over with, the soldiers and the officers there are going to play a part in the reconstruction in Indian Territory. Reconstruction happened in Indian Territory just as it did throughout southern states.
After the war, everybody wanted to grow.
As Indian Territory prepared to become part of the new state of Oklahoma, Fort Gibson continued to have a front row seat for historic Cherokee events.
After 1890, as the Dawes Act and the Curtis Acts are passed, the soldiers return to Indian Territory with the Dawes Commission to protect records. And they use Fort Gibson as a base of operation. The old buildings left up on top of the garrison at the hill up there were used by the Dawes Commission to sign up the freedmen of the Cherokee Nation. It also served as payment point for the sale of the Cherokee outlet.
It was quite a mixture of people and quite a mixture of cultures here at Fort Gibson and the surrounding area.
A lot of historic events happen at the fort, around the fort, or because the fort was established there. It definitely holds its place in history for not only American history, but for Cherokee history.
Now considered the oldest permanent settlement in Oklahoma, Fort Gibson's history is forever intertwined with the history of the Cherokee Nation in Indian Territory.